The champagne flute felt heavier than it should have in my trembling hand. Around me, 37 of my closest family members and friends chatted in the warm glow of our suburban living room, completely oblivious to the fact that my world was about to implode in spectacular fashion. Danny, sweetie, come here. My wife Samantha's voice cut through the pleasant hum of conversation like a knife through silk. She stood by the fireplace, radiant in her red dress, one manicured hand resting on her still flat stomach. At 36, Sam had perfected the art of commanding a room's attention with nothing more than a smile and a strategic pause. I should have known something was wrong when she insisted on throwing this impromptu family gathering on a Tuesday night. Sam never did anything without 3 backup plans and a spreadsheet. As a senior HR executive at Morrison & Associates, she approached life with the same calculated precision she used to fire underperforming employees. Everyone, everyone! Sam tapped her wine glass with a silver spoon, the crystalline chime silencing the room. Daniel and I have some wonderful news to share. My stomach dropped to somewhere around my ankles. We'd been trying for a baby for 2 years, but the last time we'd been intimate was 3 months ago, and that had been more obligation than passion. The math didn't add up, but then again, math had never been Sam's strong suit when it suited her purposes. We're pregnant, Sam announced, her voice pitched perfectly to convey joy and surprise in equal measure. The room erupted in cheers and congratulations. My mother-in-law Ruth pushed through the crowd to embrace Sam, tears already streaming down her carefully made-up face. Oh, honey, I'm so happy for you both, Ruth gushed, shooting me a look that suggested I'd finally done something right for once. At 62, Ruth had perfected the art of the backhanded compliment, and her opinion of me had never recovered from the time I'd served store-bought potato salad at Easter dinner. I forced a smile and raised my glass. Yes, we're thrilled. The words tasted like sawdust in my mouth. Around me, faces beamed with genuine happiness. My best friend Mike clapped me on the shoulder, his construction worker hands nearly knocking me off balance. Way to go, Dan. About time you two got your act together, Mike laughed, his booming voice carrying over the congratulatory chatter. At 41, Mike had the kind of straightforward honesty that made him terrible at poker, but invaluable as a friend. That's when Sam dropped the second bomb. Actually, she said, her voice carrying that particular tone she used when delivering bad news to employees, there's something else you all should know. The baby's father isn't Daniel. The room went silent. Not the comfortable quiet of people processing good news, but the suffocating silence of a crowd, witnessing a car accident in slow motion. The father is Richard Crane, my boss at Morrison & Associates, Sam continued, her chin lifted defiantly. Rick and I have been together for 8 months now. We're in love, and we're going to raise this baby together. I felt 37 pairs of eyes turned toward me, waiting for me to collapse, to rage, to provide some kind of dramatic reaction worthy of the soap opera Sam had just unleashed in our living room. Instead, I took a slow sip of champagne and let the silence stretch until it became uncomfortable. Well, I said finally, my voice steady, despite the hurricane of emotions churning in my chest. I guess congratulations are in order. For Rick, I mean. He's getting quite a prize. Sam's sister, Lisa, who had been standing near the kitchen door with her 19-year-old daughter, Zoe, chose that moment to join the conversation. At 34, Lisa had always been the sharper-tongued of the two sisters, with the talent for finding exactly the right words to inflict maximum damage. Oh, come on, Dan, Lisa said, her voice dripping with mock sympathy. We all saw this coming. Sam's been miserable for months. You can't honestly be surprised that she found someone who actually appreciates her. Lisa's words hit their intended target, but instead of crumbling, I felt something cold and calculating settle into place behind my ribs. I looked at Lisa, then at her daughter Zoe, who was staring at the floor with the kind of intensity that suggested she was trying to disappear through sheer force of will. You know, Lisa, you're absolutely right, I said, setting down my champagne flute with deliberate care. I should have seen this coming, just like you should have seen what was happening right under your own nose. Lisa's smug expression faltered slightly. What are you talking about? I reached into my jacket pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. The room held its collective breath as I opened it to reveal a simple but elegant diamond ring. Zoe and I have been seeing each other for the past 4 months, I announced, my voice carrying clearly to every corner of the room. She's pregnant too. Congratulations, Lisa. You're going to be a grandmother. The silence that followed was different from the first one. This was the silence of a bomb detonating, of foundations cracking, of a perfectly orchestrated social gathering transforming into a battlefield. Lisa's face went through several color changes before settling on an alarming shade of purple. You sick bastard, she whispered, then louder. You sick, perverted bastard. She's 19 years old. She's also an adult, I replied calmly. And unlike some people in this room, we didn't sneak around behind anyone's back. We just chose to keep our relationship private until we were ready to make it public. Zoe looked up at me then, her dark eyes wide with a mixture of fear and admiration. She was beautiful in the way that only 19-year-olds can be, all sharp angles and untested confidence. But more than that, she was kind and funny and honest in ways that Sam had never been. Is this true? Ruth demanded, her voice shaking with outrage. Zoe, tell me this isn't true. Zoe straightened her shoulders and moved to stand beside me. It's true, Grandma. Dan and I love each other. And yes, I'm pregnant. The room erupted. Lisa lunged toward me, but Mike stepped between us. Sam's face had gone white, her carefully planned moment of triumph now completely overshadowed by my revelation. Ruth was fanning herself with a cocktail napkin, muttering prayers under her breath. This is insane, Sam shrieked. You're all insane. Daniel, you can't be serious about this. Dead serious, I replied. In fact, I've already filed for divorce. You should be receiving the papers tomorrow morning. That's when Marcy Henderson, Sam's best friend and the neighborhood's unofficial gossip coordinator, decided to take matters into her own hands. At 42, Marcy had never met a drama she couldn't escalate or a confidence she couldn't betray. I'm calling the police, Marcy announced, pulling out her phone with theatrical flair. This is clearly a domestic disturbance, and someone needs to protect these women from this predator. Predator? I laughed, the sound coming out harder than I'd intended. That's rich, coming from someone who's been covering for Sam's affair for months. Tell me, Marcy, how many other wives in the neighborhood are you helping cheat on their husbands? Before Marcy could respond, the sound of sirens filled the air. She'd actually called 911, and now 2 patrol cars were pulling into our driveway, their red and blue lights painting the living room walls in alternating colors of chaos. This is our cue to leave, I said to Zoe, taking her hand. Unless you want to spend the evening explaining to Officer Martinez why a perfectly legal relationship between 2 consenting adults constitutes a crime. We made it to the back door just as the police knocked on the front. As we slipped out into the cool October night, I could hear Sam's voice rising above the confusion, trying to regain control of the narrative she'd lost the moment I'd revealed my own secret. Wait, Zoe said as we reached my car. Are you really okay with all this? Walking away from your house, your life? I looked back at the chaos we'd left behind, at the house I'd spent 5 years turning into a home for a woman who'd been planning to leave me for months. Through the window, I could see Sam gesturing wildly at the police officers, probably trying to convince them that I was the villain in this particular story. Honestly, I said, opening the car door for Zoe, I've never felt better, but you should know things are about to get very complicated. Sam and her friends aren't going to let this go quietly. Zoe smiled, and for the first time all evening it reached her eyes. Good thing I like complicated. As we drove away, I caught sight of Rick Crane's BMW pulling up to the curb. Even from a distance, I could see him on his phone, probably calling his lawyer or his publicist or whoever it was that rich men called when their carefully constructed lives began to unravel. I had a feeling that phone call was going to be the first of many. The Riverside Motel wasn't exactly the Four Seasons, but it was clean, anonymous, and most importantly, it was the last place anyone would think to look for the former Daniel Wilcox, suburban project manager and newly minted social pariah. Room 237, I said to Zoe, holding up the plastic key card. I always wanted to stay in a Stephen King reference. She laughed, the sound bright and genuine in the fluorescent lit hallway. You know, most guys don't make horror movie jokes when they're running away from their old lives. Most guys don't have my particular talent for turning ordinary situations into complete disasters, I replied, sliding the key card into the lock. It's a gift. The room was exactly what you'd expect from a $40 a night establishment. Two double beds with questionably stained comforters, a television that probably predated the Clinton administration, and the lingering aroma of industrial disinfectant mixed with decades of cigarette smoke. Home sweet home, Zoe said, dropping her overnight bag on the bed nearest the window. So, what's our next move? Do we flee to Mexico? Change our names and start a new life raising llamas? I sat down on the other bed, suddenly feeling the weight of what we'd just done. Actually, I was thinking we'd start with breakfast and work our way up to international fugitive status. My phone buzzed with a text message, then another, then a series of rapid-fire notifications that suggested the news of last night's drama had spread beyond our living room. Let me guess, Zoe said, watching my expression. The vultures are circling? I scrolled through the messages, most of them from numbers I didn't recognize. Word traveled fast in our suburb, especially when it involved adultery, age gaps, and police cars in driveways. Apparently, I'm either a predator, a victim, or a mastermind, depending on who's telling the story, I said, reading one particularly creative interpretation of events. Mrs. Patterson from Three Houses Down thinks I've been planning this for months as some kind of elaborate revenge plot. Were you? Zoe asked, and there was something in her voice that made me look up from my phone. No, I said honestly. Last night was me improvising badly under pressure. The revenge part comes later. She smiled at that, settling cross-legged on her bed like she was at a sleepover instead of hiding out in a motel after destroying two families in one evening. Good, she said, because I have some ideas about that. Before I could ask what she meant, my phone rang. Mike's name appeared on the screen, and I answered on the second ring. Please tell me you're not actually dead in a ditch somewhere, Mike's voice boomed through the speaker, because the rumors flying around this morning are getting increasingly creative. Still breathing, I assured him, though my reputation might need life support. Yeah, about that. You might want to avoid social media for the next few decades. Marcy Henderson has been posting updates about last night like she's running a news service. According to her latest bulletin, you've either fled to Canada or you're hiding out in your mother's basement plotting your next move. My mother lives in Florida and hates surprise visitors, I said. So that theory's out. Where are you really? Mike asked, his tone shifting to something more serious. I looked at Zoe, who nodded. Mike had been my friend for 15 years. If I couldn't trust him now, I couldn't trust anyone. The Riverside Motel on Highway 9, I said. Room 237. Jesus, Dan. That place rents rooms by the hour. Only after 10 p.m., I corrected. I checked. There was a pause, then Mike's laughter filled the room. You know what? I'm proud of you, man. Sam had it coming, and everyone knew it. The only surprise is that you waited this long to call her bluff. Thanks for the support, but I have a feeling you're going to be in the minority on that opinion. Maybe, Mike said. But here's the thing. Rick Crane showed up at your house this morning. He and Sam were loading boxes into his BMW like they were moving her out. I felt something cold settle in my stomach. Already? The divorce papers haven't even been served yet. Gets better. Apparently, Rick's wife found out about the affair sometime between last night and this morning. Word is she's filing for divorce too, and she's going after half of everything he owns. Zoe was watching me intently, picking up on the shift in my expression. I put the phone on speaker so she could hear. How do you know all this? I asked Mike. Because Rick's wife called me at 6 this morning. Turns out she's been suspicious for months, and she wanted to thank you for finally giving her the proof she needed. She also wanted me to give you a message, which is, she's got a lawyer, a private investigator, and a very detailed understanding of Rick's business practices. If you're interested in comparing notes, she's buying lunch. I looked at Zoe, who was grinning like Christmas morning had come early. Tell her yes, I said, but not today. I need to take care of something first. After Mike hung up, Zoe moved to sit beside me on my bed. What do we need to take care of? We need to go see your mother, I said. Last night was an ambush. Today we do this properly. Zoe's expression sobered. Dan, she's going to try to have you arrested. She spent the entire night calling everyone she knows, trying to build a case against you. Let her try, I said, standing up and reaching for my jacket. I'm 39 years old, you're 19, and we're both consenting adults. The only thing she can accuse me of is poor timing and questionable taste in revenge tactics. And the pregnancy? Zoe asked quietly. I stopped, my hand on the door handle. We hadn't talked about that part yet, the lie I'd told to match Sam's bombshell revelation. We'll figure it out, I said. But first, we deal with your mother. Then, we deal with Sam and Rick. Then, we figure out what comes next. Zoe stood up and kissed me, quick and fierce. I love that you're not backing down. Sweetheart, I said, opening the door to face whatever chaos waited outside. I'm just getting started. The drive to Lisa's house took 20 minutes, but it felt like 20 hours. Every red light was an opportunity to second-guess the decision. Every turn a chance to change direction and disappear into the anonymous sprawl of suburban America. But I'd spent 5 years backing down from confrontations, 5 years swallowing my pride, and keeping the peace for the sake of family harmony. Last night had burned that bridge to ash, and I was surprised to discover how liberating it felt to stand in the flames. Lisa's house was a modest, two-story colonial in a neighborhood that was trying hard to be upscale but couldn't quite afford the pretension. Her car was in the driveway along with two others I didn't recognize. Reinforcements, Zoe observed, probably Aunt Ruth and Marcy. Perfect, I said, parking across the street. I do my best work with an audience. We walked up the front steps together and I knocked on the door with more confidence than I felt. Lisa answered on the second knock, her face cycling through surprise, anger, and something that might have been fear. You have some nerve showing up here, she said, but she didn't close the door. We need to talk, I said simply. All of us. Like adults. Lisa hesitated, then stepped aside to let us in. The living room was exactly what I'd expected. Ruth and Marcy sitting on the couch like a tribunal, their expressions ranging from disapproving to openly hostile. Daniel, Ruth said, her voice dripping with disappointment. I thought you were better than this. So did I replied, taking a seat in the chair across from them. Zoe sat on the arm of the chair, her hand resting on my shoulder in a gesture of solidarity that was probably calculated to infuriate her grandmother. This is sick, Marcy said, her voice shaking with righteous indignation. She's barely out of high school, and you're old enough to be her father. I'm 20 years older than her, I said calmly. The same age difference as Sam and Rick, incidentally. But somehow that's romantic while this is predatory? That's completely different, Lisa snapped. Sam is a grown woman who knows what she wants. And I'm not? Zoe spoke for the first time since we'd entered the house, her voice steady and clear. I'm 19, not 9. I can vote, I can serve in the military, I can sign contracts and take out loans, and make my own decisions about who I want to be with. You're being manipulated, Ruth said, her tone gentler but no less certain. Honey, men like Daniel are experts at making young girls think they're mature enough for adult relationships. I felt Zoe's hand tighten on my shoulder and I covered it with my own. Actually, I said, Zoe pursued me. She asked me out, she made the first move, and she's been making her own decisions every step of the way. The only thing I'm guilty of is saying yes when I probably should have said no. Because you knew it was wrong, Lisa said triumphantly. No, I replied, because I knew it would complicate things. And because I knew that people like you would refuse to see her as anything other than a victim, regardless of what she actually wants. Marcy leaned forward, her eyes bright with malicious curiosity. And what about the pregnancy? Are you going to take responsibility for that too? I looked at Zoe, who gave me an almost imperceptible nod. There is no pregnancy, I said. That was a lie I told to match Sam's dramatic revelation. Poor judgment on my part, but effective theater. The relief on Ruth's face was almost comical. So, you're not actually... No, Zoe said firmly. But we are together and we're not apologizing for it. Lisa stood up abruptly, pacing to the window like a caged animal. This is insane. Yesterday you were my brother-in-law. Today you're... What? My daughter's boyfriend? How am I supposed to process that? The same way I processed finding out that my wife has been sleeping with her boss for 8 months, I said. One day at a time, with as much grace as you can manage. That's not the same thing, Marcy protested. You're right, I agreed. It's not. Because Zoe and I aren't hurting anyone except your sense of propriety. I stood up and Zoe rose with me. We came here to be honest with you, not to ask for permission. Zoe is an adult, and she's capable of making her own choices. You can accept that and try to maintain some kind of relationship with your daughter. Or you can keep treating her like a child and lose her entirely. Are you threatening me? Lisa demanded. I'm giving you a choice, I said. The same choice Sam had when she decided to blow up our marriage in front of 37 people, instead of talking to me privately. Ruth stood up slowly, her age showing in the careful way she moved. And what choice is that? You can be part of our lives, or you can be part of the drama, I said. But you can't be both. We left them there, three women sitting in stunned silence in a living room that suddenly felt too small for the emotions it contained. As we walked back to the car, Zoe slipped her hand into mine. That went better than I expected, she said. Really? Because I'm pretty sure your mother is already planning my funeral. Probably, Zoe agreed cheerfully. But she's also thinking about what you said. Mom's not stupid, just stubborn. Give her time. As we drove away, I caught sight of Lisa watching us from her front window. Her expression was unreadable, but she didn't look away until we'd turned the corner and disappeared from view. My phone buzzed with a text from Mike. Rick's wife wants to meet tomorrow at 2 p.m. Rosario's Deli on Main Street. Her name is Catherine, and she says to tell you she's looking forward to comparing notes. I showed the message to Zoe, who smiled with the kind of anticipation that suggested she was already planning our next move. This is going to be fun, she said. Looking at her profile in the afternoon sunlight, I realized she was probably right. For the first time in years, I was looking forward to tomorrow instead of dreading it. Catherine Crane was nothing like I'd expected. Where I'd imagined a pampered socialite wife, I found a sharp-eyed woman in her mid-40s who looked like she could run a Fortune 500 company before lunch and still have energy left to destroy her cheating husband's reputation by dinner. You must be Daniel, she said, rising from her corner booth at Rosario's Deli. I'm Catherine. Thank you for meeting me on such short notice. She was elegant in the way that money couldn't buy, with silver-streaked hair pulled back in a simple ponytail, and clothes that were expensive without being flashy. When she shook my hand, her grip was firm, and her eyes were calculating. Thank you for reaching out, I said, sliding into the booth across from her. I have to admit, I wasn't sure what to expect. Honestly, neither was I. Catherine signaled the waitress for coffee. When Mike told me you'd agreed to meet, I spent the entire morning trying to figure out whether you were a victim, a villain, or something else entirely. And what's your conclusion? She smiled, and it wasn't entirely pleasant. I think you're someone who got tired of being underestimated. I can relate to that. The waitress brought coffee and took our lunch orders, giving us a few minutes to size each other up. Catherine had the kind of controlled composure that suggested she was used to being the smartest person in the room, but there was something underneath it that looked like barely contained rage. So, I said when we were alone again, Mike mentioned you have some information about Rick's business practices. I have 15 years' worth of information, Catherine replied. Bank records, tax documents, email correspondence, and a very detailed understanding of how my husband has been hiding assets and manipulating contracts to benefit his friends at Morrison and Associates. She pulled out a manila folder and set it on the table between us. The question is, what are you planning to do with similar information? I haven't decided yet, I admitted. Yesterday I was a suburban project manager, trying to save his marriage. Today I'm apparently the neighborhood pariah, dating a teenager. I'm still adjusting to the career change. Catherine laughed, a sound that was genuinely amused, despite the circumstances. You know, I like you. Rick always described you as weak and ineffective. Clearly, he was wrong about that. Rick talked about me? Oh, constantly. Especially after he started sleeping with your wife. He seemed to take particular pleasure in describing how oblivious you were to what was happening right under your nose. I felt heat rise in my cheeks, but Catherine held up a hand before I could respond. Don't be embarrassed, she said. I was just as oblivious, and I'm supposedly the smart one in my marriage. Cheaters are good at hiding their tracks, especially when they're hiding them from people who love them. Loved, I corrected. Past tense. Fair enough. Catherine opened the folder and pulled out a photograph. This was taken 6 months ago at a company retreat in the Hamptons. Rick told me he was going alone to focus on business. The photo showed Rick and Sam on a beach, clearly intimate, clearly not focused on business. Sam was wearing a bikini I'd never seen before, and Rick had his hands on her in ways that left no doubt about the nature of their relationship. Where did you get this? I asked. I hired a private investigator 8 months ago, Catherine said matter-of-factly. I suspected Rick was having an affair, but I needed proof before I could move forward with divorce proceedings. 8 months ago? But they've only been together for... I stopped, realizing what she was telling me. Your wife lied about the timeline, Catherine confirmed. They've been seeing each other for over a year. The pregnancy she announced? If it's Rick's, she's been carrying that baby for at least 6 months. I stared at the photograph, trying to process what that meant. Sam had been lying to me for over a year, not 8 months. Every conversation we'd had about starting a family, every romantic dinner, every moment of intimacy had been part of an elaborate deception. Why are you telling me this? I asked. Because I want Rick to lose everything, Catherine said simply. His job, his reputation, his assets, and his smug sense of superiority. And I think you want the same thing for your wife. She was right, but I wasn't ready to admit it out loud. What are you proposing? A partnership. I have the financial resources and the legal connections. You have inside knowledge of Morrison and Associates and a legitimate grievance against both Rick and Sam. Together, we can make sure they both pay for what they've done. And Zoe? Catherine's expression softened slightly. Your personal life is your own business. I'm not here to judge your relationship choices. I'm here to destroy my cheating husband and anyone who helped him betray me. I looked at the photograph again, studying Sam's face. She looked happy in a way I hadn't seen in years, relaxed and genuine in ways she'd never been with me. It should have hurt more than it did, but instead I felt something cold and calculating settle into place behind my ribs. What did you have in mind? I asked. Catherine smiled, and this time it was genuinely pleasant. I'm so glad you asked. She pulled out a legal pad covered in neat handwriting. First, we document everything. Every affair, every lie, every financial irregularity. I've already started the process, but I need someone with access to Morrison and Associates' internal systems. I'm a project manager, not an accountant. I don't have access to financial records. No, but you have access to email servers, personnel files, and project documentation. Rick has been steering contracts to companies owned by his friends for years. If we can prove that, we can destroy his professional reputation along with his personal one. I thought about my access to the company's project management system, the files I'd seen over the years that had seemed irregular but not worth questioning. That could work, I said slowly, but it would take time, and I'd need to be careful. If Rick suspects what I'm doing, he won't, Catherine said confidently. Rick thinks you're a pathetic cuckold who's too weak to fight back. He's not going to see you coming until it's too late. And Sam? Leave Sam to me. I have plans for your wife that don't require your direct involvement. Something in her tone made me look up from the legal pad. What kind of plans? The kind that will make her wish she'd chosen a different man's marriage to destroy. We spent the next hour going over Catherine's research, and I had to admit I was impressed. She had documented Rick's affairs going back 5 years, his questionable business dealings, and his pattern of manipulating company resources for personal gain. How long have you been planning this? I asked. Since the day I realized my marriage was over, Catherine replied. I just needed the right catalyst to put everything in motion. Your wife's dramatic announcement provided that catalyst. And if I hadn't shown up last night, if I just accepted the situation and walked away quietly, Catherine closed the folder and looked at me directly. Then Rick would have gotten away with it. Sam would have moved on to her next victim, and you would have spent the rest of your life wondering what would have happened if you'd fought back. She was right, and we both knew it. I'd spent 5 years avoiding confrontation, 5 years taking the path of least resistance, 5 years being exactly the kind of man that people like Rick and Sam could walk over without consequence. So what's our first move? And I asked. You go back to work tomorrow like nothing happened. Be the same quiet, reliable project manager you've always been. Don't give Rick any reason to suspect that you're planning anything other than a quiet divorce and a graceful exit. And while I'm being quiet and reliable, I'll be making sure that Sam's new life with Rick becomes significantly more complicated than she anticipated. Catherine stood up and left money on the table for lunch. One more thing, Daniel. This is going to get ugly before it gets better. Are you prepared for that? I thought about Sam's smug expression as she'd announced her pregnancy, about Rick's BMW in my driveway, about Lisa's assumption that I was too weak to fight back. "I'm looking forward to it," I said, and meant it. As Catherine walked away, I realized that for the first time in years, I felt like I had allies instead of just people who tolerated my presence. It was a good feeling, even if it came with the promise of war. My phone buzzed with a text from Zoe. "How did it go?" "Better than expected," I typed back. "Meet me at the motel. We need to talk about our next move." "Our next move?" "We're going to war, sweetheart. I hope you're ready." Her response came back immediately. I was born ready. Looking at those words on my phone screen, I realized that Catherine had been wrong about one thing. I wasn't someone who'd gotten tired of being underestimated. I was someone who'd finally found people who believed I was worth overestimating. The difference was everything. Walking into Morrison & Associates the next morning felt like entering enemy territory. The receptionist, Jenny, gave me a sympathetic smile that suggested the office gossip network had been working overtime. "Morning, Dan," she said softly. "How are you holding up?" "Still breathing," I replied, which seemed to be my standard response these days. The elevator ride to the third floor gave me time to adjust my game face. Catherine's plan required me to be invisible, unremarkable, the same quiet project manager I'd always been. The challenge was pretending that nothing had changed when everything had changed. Rick's office was at